Okay, so now that we have learned a lot of the different, really all the tools that I felt were necessary for the purposes of learning how to use Pixlr, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to sort of just go through random editing of this picture and see how the tools combine to do different things. So let's say, first of all, that I've decided that I want to get rid of that background. So we talked about how using the magic wand will get that done. My tolerance level is at 20, which makes part of my shirt get highlighted. So I'm going to try 16 and see where we get there. It's not enough for me, so I'm going to press Shift and add more in. And now, as I click on these little circles, most of the time what it's doing is it's only getting the parts that I want because my tolerance is so light, and it really didn't bleed into my shirt at all. Now, if I want to get rid of that shirt part, I hold Control and get rid of the little shirt part. And then you just end up fighting this battle about like how much of what are you going to be okay with as far as how you want to do it. If you click and drag across the different things, you'll see that it gets rid of things that way as well. And if you go too far, you can always click undo. Now I'm just going to try pressing delete. And now you see that is a background that I have to work with. However, I don't like that it's white. And why is it white? Okay. I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it, why it's white. Okay, the reason why it's white is because it is still my background layer, and so it thinks I'm deleting everything and wanting to go to a color background of white. That is not going to be good for you if all you're doing is planning on dragging this face and torso around. What you need to do is undo what you just did, unlock the layer, and then click delete, and now you have a transparent background. You're going to Control D for deselect, and then you're going to clean up all the little bits that are still there. And that basically is a great quick way to get rid of the background. But what's interesting here is that I did take part of my shirt with me. So if you can see here, what you ended up doing is that the shirt itself has been cut into. And what we need to do is sort of try to fill that in and replace it. So that's going to be another useful tool to know how to use. So what we could do is we could try our luck first with the patch tool and see what happens if we do that. Now, if you look at that and you zoom out, it's not going to look like I fixed my shirt, right? It's kind of smudgy, right? If you go back to the patch tool and you try to sort of draw along this area and try to do the whole thing at once, try your luck, it's still going to be pretty smudgy. So what would probably work best for you here is the clone stamp tool. So you remember you want to change your brush size to be the appropriate size for what you need to do, and then you press Control and click in order to get the area. And so what ends up happening is if you can sort of mimic the pixels around the area, no one's going to really be able to tell the difference because the shirt bunches up in places anyway. And then you could sort of use your smudge tool to kind of move the pixels around also. You could even try to blur it a little bit so that nobody could tell the difference, and then sort of resharpen everything. Sorry, that's too much. Resharpen everything, and then by the time you zoom out, you're not really going to be able to tell that anything was done. Now, of course, I know you're looking at that area and you're like, oh, I could totally tell what he did there. But if you show this picture to somebody else, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be able to see what you've done to the photo, and it'll just look like a headshot. So let's take another thing here. Let's try to do a couple of things here. We mentioned the bloat tool in a previous screencast. Kind of little funny things you could do there. But honestly, let's say that you think that the eyebrows are, let's say, too thick. So you want to make the eyebrows a little smaller. Obviously, on a tool this size, it's not going to work. So you're going to have to lower the size of the tool, and you're going to have to kind of see what works to not include the area around it. And then the other part of it is that you have to also mess with the strength of the tool as well and see what you can do to affect it that way. So now that we have it set on those strength settings, we can sort of move in and see how it affects it. So if we go back to our pinch tool and go ahead and see what happens when we pinch that way, now we zoom out and it doesn't really necessarily look, if you do it to both eyebrows, you're going to see that based on the settings we made, it's not necessarily so discernible if you were to just, again, not look at the photo and then go back and look at it again, it just looks like, I mean, look, I did more of a thinning job on that eyebrow, and you might want to just, you know, set it a couple of steps back so that it's not so thin. But you could see that to someone else looking at the photo, it would just look like a guy with not thick eyebrows. Let's take a look at, I don't know, let's say I want to make the ears a little bit bigger. So I would go to my lasso tool. I probably don't trust myself to draw a perfect lasso around it freehand with a mouse. So what I would end up doing instead is zoom in on the ear, use the space key to turn to the hand tool and move it to the center of my whole thing there. And then I would ask that, and then I would try to click on the areas that would work for me and do the magnetic lasso only around, you know, and I click at different intervals to make sure that I can only select what I want to select. And now that I've already done the background to be, you know, to be transparent, it'll be easy to sort of get only the ear and not have to be as exact. And again, just for the sake of how quick we're doing the video, we just want to do it as quickly as possible. But now I have that selected, so there's so many different things I can do right now. I could make a third ear and just move that around, you know, if you're just trying to make jokes or whatever. But the other part of it is that if you go back to how it's selected, and then you press, and then you go to edit. I couldn't press Control T because it'll make a new tab, but if you go to edit free transform, you can then decide to make this ear slightly bigger, you know, or smaller, and you know, obviously that looks ridiculous, but the general idea is that is how you would select something in a picture and manipulate it and change it into a different size or things like that. Obviously, if you don't click the shift button, you can end up not doing it proportionally, so you just want to make sure that you don't do a big whole thing there. But if you end up holding the shift key, it'll work out. And again, once you have something selected, once you have anything in your image selected, you can also cut it to be, let's say, to be its own layer. So if you just click the Control key and start, sorry, I'm on the hand tool right now, but if you click the Control key under the Move tool, and then you can pull the ear away, and now I just don't have an ear anymore. But the other part of it is that you can cut and paste this again, and now it's its own layer. So once you have your own layer, you can then make effects that apply only to that layer. So let's say I'm color changing, or I'm deciding that the hue and saturation of just that ear is going to change. So now you can see I'm only affecting that ear because it's on its own layer. That's again another reason why you want to pay attention to layers. If I had this selected and then I went to hue and saturation, you would end up affecting everything but the ear. So again, that's where like layers and everything else comes into play, and you're going to see that that's really important to pay attention to as you go through what you're doing. That's basically everything that I would do in that scenario, highlighting something and then trying to do something with it. But let's take a look down here. There's a little piece of my tie here that is kind of impinging into the shirt, and let's say I want it to look nicer. So what I would want to do is I would want to first see if I can do the spot heel. Always check for spot heel to see if that would work. And obviously there we see that it doesn't work. Even dragging along it didn't work either. So in this case you would want to clone stamp what's immediately above it, you know, and then just kind of drag down. And now as you zoom out, you will see that if you didn't know to look for it, you would notice that the nubbin is gone and that there's like a little circle there. So you have all kinds of different things that you can do, you know, to a photo to change what you need to change. And then just to remind you that now this is its own floating thing, so that can be manipulated as well. If you were to press edit and free transform, it would be manipulating just that, and then you could do different random things to only that, and you've got your background, your invisible background behind you. But let's say that I had selected something and it was on its own layer, and I cut it. Sorry, let's say that I had that ear here, because that's from before we had that. So if you've got the ear here and it's hanging around in the photo, and you're like, oh, the bell rang and I need to save my work and continue, this is going to be the last thing we'll show you. When you save, make sure, again, you do not save as a JPEG. You save it as a PXD, a layered file, because when you come back to it, it's going to be something. So let's say you save it on your desktop somewhere, or you save it in your Google Drive. That way, let's close this, and I already saved, so I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to open an image. I save this one on my desktop, and you'll see 2016 faculty photo with the PXD, it opens back up with the layers. If I had saved that as a JPEG, you would open up a photo that looks like this with a ridiculous ear and only one layer on it, because when you save it as a JPEG, it flattens the image, and you no longer are able to manipulate layers the way that you want to. So if you're saving your work to come back to later, please remember that you save it as a PXD file, and always pay attention to the layers that you're working with. That's it for now, and I think we're going to stop it there. Good luck with everything, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.